So today I want to talk about something that is far more important than the headlines most people are focused on right now. 5. Everyone is watching the elections. 5. Everyone is watching the tariff announcements and the emergency meetings and the military exercises and the central bank statements. 5. Everyone is watching the surface turbulence and calling it instability. 5. But almost nobody is asking the question that actually matters most to the people who will have to live inside the world that emerges from this 5 period. What if instability is not the right word for what we are witnessing? What if the thing that appears to be a series of a disconnected crisis is actually a coordinated redistribution of power that has been building for more than a decade? What if the world is not falling apart, but being reorganized around a new set of strategic realities that will determine which nations prosper, which nations stagnate, 5, and which nations discover too late that the assumptions they build their future on no longer apply? 5. Because that is what I want to walk you through today. The moves being made right now by the United States, by China, by Russia, by Europe, 5, and by the increasingly decisive nations of the global south are not isolated reactions to recent events. They are the visible manifestations of a much deeper structural shift. 5. And that shift is changing the balance of power in ways that will affect everything from energy prices and manufacturing jobs to currency stability. 5. And national security. Depending on where your country sits in this transformation. 5. Depending on which dependencies it is reducing and which new relationships it is cultivating. The next decade may look radically different from what policymakers and ordinary citizens have come to expect. So today I want to walk you through the realignment now underway. 5. The strategic logic driving each major actor and the larger pattern that connects all of them. And once you see that pattern, 5, the world looks very different. The first thing you need to understand, the foundation of everything else I'm going to tell you today is this. 5. The global balance of power has already shifted. The debate is not about whether it is changing. 5. The debate is about who has recognized that change and who is still behaving as though the old order remains intact. Power transitions are rarely announced when they begin. They do not arrive with a formal declaration or a universally acknowledged starting date. 5. They emerge gradually through changes in trade routes, military doctrine, demographic trends, financial systems, and technological control. By the time the transition becomes obvious to everyone, the most important strategic decisions have already been made. 5. The analytical framework I want to use today is what I call leverage concentration. Every major actor in the international system is attempting to consolidate control over the specific assets that will matter most in a world where trust is lower, alliances are more conditional, and economic interdependence is increasingly weaponized. Some countries are concentrating leverage deliberately with a clear understanding of the world they believe is coming. 5. Others are discovering that the forms of leverage they relied on are eroding faster than they can replace them. The difference between those two categories will determine who shapes the next order and who must adapt to rules written by others. Let me walk you through each of the major players with that framework in mind. On the surface, 5. The United States appears to remain the unchallenged center of the international system. It possesses the world's most capable military, 5. The dominant reserve currency, the leading technology firms, and a network of alliances without historical precedent. But underneath that surface, 5. The United States is engaged in a strategic transformation that is widely misunderstood. 5. America is moving from scale-based dominance to chokepoint dominance. For most of the post-Cold War period, the United States sought to maintain influence by being present everywhere at once. Military bases, naval deployments, development programs, F5, and open markets were all part of a system designed to sustain a broadly liberal international order. Today, Washington is becoming more selective. 5, rather than attempting to control every region directly, it is concentrating on a smaller number of leverage points that offer outsized influence. 5. Advanced semiconductors, artificial intelligence, infrastructure, dollar clearing systems, undersea cables. 5. And liquefied natural gas exports are now treated as strategic assets. This is not retrenchment in the conventional sense. It is optimization. For ordinary Americans, 5. This means a country that remains extraordinarily powerful, but increasingly focused on where each dollar of influence generates the highest return. Some commitments will deepen, others will become conditional. 5. And the domestic debate over who benefits from global leadership will become more intense. That transition is disruptive, it is not decline. Now, let us turn to the actor whose rise has forced nearly every other nation to reconsider its assumptions. On the surface, China appears to be the inevitable challenger to American primacy. It is the world's manufacturing center, 5, a technological competitor of growing sophistication, and the anchor of an expanding network of trade and infrastructure relationships. But here is the critical reality most observers miss. China is pursuing expansion under tightening constraints. China's strategic position is formidable, but it is shaped by a narrowing window. Demographic aging, debt accumulation, slowing productivity growth, I5, and a property sector that once drove enormous portions of economic activity are all placing increasing pressure on the system. This does not mean China is weakening in any simplistic sense. It means Beijing understands that time matters. Its leadership appears to believe that the coming decade may represent the most important period in which to secure supply chains. 5. Technological self-sufficiency, maritime access, and regional influence before structural headwinds become more pronounced. And 5. China's strategic behavior makes more sense when viewed through that lens. What many interpret as confidence is also urgency. What appears to be patience is paired with a growing recognition that the most advantageous conditions may not last indefinitely. 5. And urgency, when combined with national capability, is one of the most consequential forces in international politics. Now let us turn to a power that remains central not because of its size alone, but because of its capacity to exploit systemic friction. On the surface, Russia appears isolated, sanctioned, and constrained by prolonged conflict and economic pressure. But underneath that surface, EU5 Russia has demonstrated an enduring ability to convert disruption into leverage. I want to describe this as the friction advantage. 5. The strategic benefit gained by an actor that increases the costs of the existing order without needing to replace that order immediately with something coherent of its own. Russia's comparative strength lies in its tolerance for prolonged pressure and its continued relevance in energy commodities and security. and 5. Calculations across Eurasia. Its objective is not necessarily to restore a previous imperial position in full. Its more practical goal is to ensure that any future international settlement takes Russian interests into account and reflects a world in which I5 Western assumptions are less dominant than before. For ordinary Russians, the economic and social costs are substantial. But from a strategic perspective, the state has shown a willingness to absorb those costs in pursuit of a longer-term rebalancing. The question is not whether Russia can dominate the system. 5. It is whether it can ensure that the system can no longer operate without accounting for it. Now let us consider the region whose prosperity has been built on assumptions that are being tested more severely than at any time in decades. 5. On the surface, Europe remains one of the wealthiest and most institutionally sophisticated regions in the world. But underneath that surface of Europe is confronting the reality that many of the conditions supporting its post-Cold War model are no longer guaranteed. Cheap external energy, unconditional American security guarantees, and stable commercial integration with China all formed essential pillars of European economic strategy. 5. Each of those pillars has become less certain. The result is a region with extraordinary capabilities but difficult strategic choices. 5. Industrial competitiveness, defense spending, energy policy, and political cohesion are now increasingly interconnected. For ordinary Europeans, this transition is experienced through higher living costs, debates over reindustrialization, 5 growing questions about what degree of strategic autonomy Europe can realistically achieve. 5. Europe possesses immense resources and institutional depths. What remains uncertain is whether its political systems can align quickly enough to convert those assets into a unified long-term strategy. That uncertainty is one of the defining variables of the global transition. Now let us turn to the actors whose influence is expanding more quietly, but perhaps more significantly than most people appreciate. On the surface, 5. The nations of the global south are often portrayed as secondary participants navigating choices made by larger powers. That interpretation is increasingly outdated. What is emerging across India, Brazil, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, 5. Turkey and others is a strategic posture best described as option maximization. These countries are deliberately preserving flexibility, 5. Engaging with multiple power centers and extracting investment technology and market access without binding themselves permanently to a single bloc. 5. India deepens security cooperation with the West while maintaining extensive ties with Russia. 5. Saudi Arabia strengthens relations with both Washington and Beijing. 5. Indonesia leverages its industrial and resource position to attract competing interests. This is not indecision. It is strategy. For billions of people living in these countries, 5. This approach offers the possibility of accelerating development while avoiding dependence on any one external patron. 5. The nations that can maintain internal stability while preserving external flexibility may find themselves with more strategic influence than ever. 5 before. So now let us step back and look at the larger picture, because what connects all of these stories is a single underlying transformation. The international order that emerged after 1945 and expanded after 1991 was built on relatively predictable assumptions. 5. Security was broadly anchored by American power. Trade expanded under increasingly open rules. Capital moved with fewer restrictions. I5. Supply chains optimized for efficiency rather than resilience. Those assumptions are being revised. The central shift is this. Power is moving away from universal access and toward conditional access. Markets remain open but increasingly subject to strategic criteria. 5. Security guarantees continue, but with greater expectations of reciprocity. Technology flows persist, but under tighter controls. 5. Capital is available, but often tied to geopolitical alignment. This transition changes the incentives facing every government on Earth. Countries are now asking different questions. Which dependencies are acceptable? Which technologies are indispensable? Which alliances are reliable? 5. Which resources are irreplaceable? And the answers to those questions are reshaping the global balance of power. You might expect the ultimate winner of this transition to be either the United States or China. But that is not the most important conclusion. The actors best positioned to benefit are the countries that possess assets both major blocs require and the strategic independence to negotiate. 5. With each on favorable terms. Energy producers, food exporters, critical mineral suppliers, manufacturing hubs, maritime choke points. 5. Countries with institutional competence and room to maneuver. In a world defined by conditional access, flexibility becomes a form of power. And 5. The most valuable position is no longer absolute dominance. It is indispensable relevance. 5. The real beneficiaries of this transition may therefore be the nations that combine resources, geography, 5. and strategic autonomy into a portfolio of options neither superpower can ignore. And that leads to the most important conclusion of all. 5. The global balance of power has already shifted. 5. Not because one empire collapsed overnight, and not because another has achieved uncontested supremacy. 5. But because the rules governing influence are being rewritten in real time. 5. The United States is concentrating power around critical choke points rather than universal commitments. China 5. China is with urgency shaped by structural constraints. Russia is exploiting friction to preserve relevance. 5. Europe is searching for a coherent strategic model. The global south is maximizing options while extracting value from competing centers of power. And the grand thesis of everything we have discussed today is this. The world is not becoming less ordered. It is becoming differently ordered. The assumptions that governed the last generation are giving way to a system in which leverage matters more than scale. Flexibility matters more than ideology, and optionality matters more than alignment. The nations with the most options, the greatest strategic autonomy, and 5, and the resources others cannot easily replace are the ones that will emerge from this transition stronger than they entered it. And once that reality becomes fully visible, nothing will be the